Christine. So this has been the most requested training over the past 3 years. So here's a little bit about the speakers we have with us today. Catherine Barnes. She's an LC and CLCP, a senior lighting designer at RAB Lighting. Catherine is primarily responsible for lighting and control systems design, lighting design at RAB Lighting. She was a senior project engineer with a consulting engineering firm in New York State for approximately 20 years. Catherine was responsible for lighting power system design as well as project management. Catherine serves currently as the treasurer of the local IES chapter in Syracuse, New York. We also have Bob Henderson, LC, CLEP, Director of Training at RAB Lighting. Bob has worked in lighting as a consultant and a director of training at 3 lighting centers. He's also been a sales agent, a utility lighting specialist. Bob has presented to over 100 different lighting seminars in outdoor lighting and indoor lighting and controls. He's worked with cities and counties to develop 25 municipal and county outdoor lighting ordinances. He currently holds the LC, Lighting Certified, and CLEP, Certified Lighting Efficiency Professional. He served on the chair of both test committees and now teaches the prep courses for the LC and CLEP exams. It was lots of fun collaborating with you on this project, writing and holding a lighting specification. Let me turn it over to Catherine.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Barnes with RAB Lighting, and we're going to talk today about writing and holding a lighting specification. First, I want to mention that the materials are copyright, so don't steal them, please. I'm going to go into the course description. This course will present the guidance to the lighting specifier on what and how to provide a lighting and control spec that promotes health and well-being and positions the client's owners to meet the project's goals. This involves the writing of a solid spec, identifying the threats that could move the project off the path, and providing information to assist in mitigating the threats and managing the process for a successful outcome and completion. The learning objectives. At the end of this course, participants should be able to understand how a lighting spec can affect the overall welfare of the lighting environment, learn how to write a solid lighting spec that promotes safety in the workplace, identify the threats that can derail any lighting spec, and obtain the knowledge to exercise skill to defend the integrity of an health-promoting lighting specification. So what is a lighting specification? It's a clear description along with quantities and installation details shown on the drawings to achieve the lighting intent that allows for budgeting and bidding the lighting equipment. The lighting spec is typically prepared by either the electrical engineer, the lighting designer, or sometimes the architect or the interior designer. The lighting specification eliminates ambiguity by describing equipment in as much detail as necessary to achieve the desired aesthetic. And so in this case, we have this beautiful church, and we wanted to provide uplighting. And that's a lovely thing. But I mean, for example, if we had not looked over the submittals, we could have gotten a fixture that had both uplighting and downlighting or downlighting only. So it's important to make sure that we specify exactly what we're trying to go for with regard to the design. Next, we want to safely perform the intended function. So for example, if we use these light fixtures to augment the emergency lighting, and then we receive light fixtures in that are installed that are not the same thing that we specified, that could decrease the amount of egress lighting available. So then therefore they don't meet the intended function of the lighting in the space. Complying with the project's goals and constraints. So for example, these fixtures were existing to be replaced. So we specified, the exact fixtures that we needed in order to make sure that we had the illumination levels that were required, based on the existing mounting heights and things like this. So if we receive subpar fixtures that don't meet the design intent, it might not necessarily, meet what we're looking for if they don't provide the right fixtures that we specify. We need to help the specifier ensure that the intended equipment ultimately gets installed on the project. And this includes identifying the products and their locations to achieve the lighting design intent to promote the welfare of those in the lighted environment. So what should a lighting specification include? We should have the product specifications, the Luminaire schedule, and the drawings. So the product specifications are usually in the 2600 section of the spec book. If you're using the master spec, there's many different sections in there for lighting. There's interior, exterior, there could be controls, perhaps lamps if you're doing a retrofit, and then emergency lighting as well. So the other component is a Luminaire schedule. So here is just one example of a Luminaire schedule. This has a lot of good information on it, the symbols, the types, et cetera, et cetera. We've got the manufacturer and model number. Sometimes we can also add an alternate manufacturer and model number for like an approved equal. Sometimes we can include quantities, which helps the contractor to do his takeoffs. One thing that I definitely like to see when I'm doing my controls design is whether or not the fixtures are supplied with 0 to 10 volt control wiring, or if they're triac dimming. So this Luminaire schedule is pretty generic, but there's some things that we could either add or take off if we wanted to. But one of the things that we need to have in order to spec fixtures. Lastly, we have the drawings. So the drawings show the physical locations of the fixtures, and sometimes usually the mounting heights, perhaps how they're installed, the circuiting, and then any controls. This is actually a control drawing showing sensors controlling fixtures in a room, but that's an aside.
Let me see. Jackson. Let me see Jackson County. Jackson County, right?
So next, outline specification and drawings. They follow a rather strict guideline. And the most common types of specification approaches are the performance-based, then the single name or proprietary, and then there's the multiple name, typically one name spec, and then alternates or a 3-name spec. Now for North Carolina, this is not my forte. I'm going to let Christine and Bob take over for here.
All right, so number one, is this a good example of a 3-name spec? So the answer is no. So let me just tell you, in my research, when we think about a 3-name bid, a public bid, the State Construction Office is really who I thought of first. I was able to talk with 3 senior level managers who are also engineers. And so this, in their opinion, one person, both gave me their personal opinion, and one person spoke on behalf of the State Construction Office and said that this does not meet the intent of the statute 133-3. And we're going to share with you later and so forth, as far as a little bit about what that is. Number 2 is providing a 2-name names on the 3-name spec ever okay? Well, the good news is yes. In fact, you can even have 1 name on a 3-name spec if you meet the criteria. So the criteria would be if an architect or maybe the owner or whatever had such a unique fixture or something where it would require that it was just almost impossible for a 2nd or 3rd supplier to provide a name, then it's certainly possible. And this does occur. And so absolutely 2 names or even the possibility of 1 name is possible depending on the situation. Number 3 is where the complaints file. They're filed with the Attorney General. So let me tell you a little bit about what I learned there. And I also talked with an individual with not only the 2 individuals with the State Construction Office, but 1 person with the senior level person with the Board of Engineers and Surveyors. And so what I was reminded of was that anyone, a citizen, can file a complaint on just about anything regarding anything public with the Attorney General's office. And so the procedure that would fall is that they would look at it, deem whether it was warrants an investigation. And then if it doesn't warrant investigation, they would investigate, and then they would make a ruling and go forward. So it's not just necessarily, let's just, for instance, let's just say if the state construction office noticed something that was a little bit irregular. So what would they do if it was a public bid and so forth? How would that process work? So the way it works is that is escalated all the way up to the top of the state construction office. And then if that person, and it's decided that this warrants some further investigation, they would send a communication over to the Attorney General's office. If they decided it was worthy of investigation, they would investigate, and then the appropriate action, adjudication and so forth would take place. So that's the way that works. Very interesting information that I found out there. All right, so.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to turn my camera off and we can keep going with the presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine. And so I'm going to do the same, and I'll be back on with you shortly.
Okay, so the lighting specification components, when combined, these three pieces of information are considered to be a minimum for a lighting specification. So at this point, I'd like to point out that it's been my experience that it's typically best to call out certain pieces of information in only one of these areas. Sometimes if you're going through and you're editing the specification section, you don't remember that you selected maybe a random color temperature in the spec section, but then you get to the Luminaire schedule and you have a different color temperature or a different gauge called out versus in the specification versus the actual part number of this fixture that you have specified in the schedule. That could cause confusion. So typically trying to keep all the information in one spot on these three pieces of information is the best way that I found to do it, because otherwise it could cause confusion if you miss it.
Okay.
Okay. So the lighting specification, all documentation needs to be clear and precise. If it's not clear and precise, you're opening yourself up to contractors to try and sub something or not give you exactly what you're looking for. Product specification sheets, we have to make sure that they're all complete and contain all of the needed information. And just providing these sheets is not enough. Product equals. There are no two products that are truly equal, because that would perhaps infringe on copyright. So therefore, we usually say approved equal. Now, sometimes you're specifying fixtures and contractors try to come up with some approved equals for you. For example, I specified a beautiful antler fixture in a big lobby in a little terminal building out in Arizona, made from real deer antlers with little incandescent lamps. It looked fabulous. And then we had a contractor come in and try and substitute with something that looked very similar, but it wasn't real antlers, it was fake antlers. So, I was like, it looks similar and it has the same amount of lamps. Perhaps I could use this one. What's my credit going to be? The credit was just negligible. So, he tried to substitute and I said no, and we did get the antler fixture in there like I wanted, and it looks beautiful. So performance specifications, identify as completely as possible the quantifiable and qualitative aspects of a lighting product's performance. Any approved product must meet or exceed the performance characteristics that are set forth in your spec. Some of the things that we can provide performance-based specifications are the life of the fixture, the candle power of the fixture, and even binning. So approved equal metric. So say somebody gives you an approved equal, you have to first look at the fixture specification sheets. Now, typically, The spec sheets, I don't do this slide, somebody else did, but typically the fixture spec sheets are all included in the submittal. So that would be the first place that you look to see whether or not whatever they're offering meets what you are specifying. Then the next thing that you look at is the IES LM79 and then TN21 reports to compare those. And then finally, in my opinion, the illuminance and the point-by-point calculations and layout should be considered to make sure that it's similar and meeting your design constraints. So then we have shop drawings, but like I mentioned, in my opinion, shop drawings and fixture specification sheets are typically one and the same, but I didn't do this slide. So, so single source package, the advantage is the cost can be less because of freight because you're using one single source provider. And then it's easier for the contractor to just touch base with one particular supplier and like one-stop shopping. It's much easier. The disadvantage is it could cost more because it is one-stop shopping. They know that you have they know that they have the business and they don't have competition to decrease their prices, and perhaps products aren't available when you need them, and that's definitely important in construction. If they don't have the product available, you sometimes have to use a spec fixture. So the lighting spec location, it's usually, like I talked about before, Division 26. So we have the OGS in New York, we have Nebraska specifications, but we've got, there are a lot of different entities that have their own specifications, like different universities, large manufacturers, Corning, and then places like Disney or Starbucks, they have their own specifications, and you have to make sure that when you're preparing your specifications, you are using the right, master specs if they do have their own. So master specs, individuals charged with preparing the lighting specification must coordinate with the project team leader to ensure that the documentation is formatted properly. It must meet the specific project requirements in order to be included in the master specs. And master specs include the complete set of specifications for every component of the project. This includes site, civil, the MEP, general conditions. Also in the master specs is where you find your bid docs. In the bid documentation, that has the spot for if you have any allowances for fixtures, if you have any alternates, for example, if you have like a base fixture, but if you want the fancy fixture, this is where they could do the different bids, showing how much the price difference would be. And then any add-ons, if you have a certain wing that you have a certain amount of fixtures that aren't being done, or specific areas that aren't being done under the initial phase, they could be potentially an add-on, but that's where you find all that information. The flow of information. So typically we have our client and our owner, and they're directly speaking with the architect who speaks with the lighting consultant, and then they talk to their rep. But then on the other side, once the project is designed, we have the GC who's actually going to build the project, and they still have to talk with the contractor, the distributors, the lighting manufacturers, and the reps. So there's a lot of, the flow of information is, there's a lot of information going back and forth between all these entities. So the building process challenge, participants in the building process are constantly challenged to deliver successful projects despite tight budgets, limited manpower, accelerated schedules, and limited or conflicting information. The significant disciplines such as architectural, structural, and MEP design should be well coordinated, as two things can't take place at the same place and time. So this lends itself to a design charrette in the beginning. In the beginning, if you get together with all the stakeholders in this project, you are, it's better for a positive outcome with the project. It's important to know what people's budgets are so that you don't, design this Cadillac system if they only want, a Chevy Malibu. Design charrettes come in handy in these kind of situations for sure. Phases of a lighting spec. Phase 1, concept, design, and budget. That's where the design charrette would come in. Phase 2 would be construction documents, bidding, and then contractor selection. So construction documents is when we would be coordinating with all the other trades. When I talk about that antler fixture, that fixture weighed 1,200 pounds. So I had to make sure that I coordinated with the structural people to make sure that there was enough structure in order to support that guy. Bidding and contractor selection. So if you get to the bidding stage and you see that the electrical contractors are way off, one way or the other, that could specify a problem in your documents, and you have to go back and make sure that they understand everything that you have on your drawings. The third phase is construction, inspection, commissioning, and occupancy. So, during construction, this is when we have submittal review. So, this is your last chance at making sure you're going to get exactly what you specified. I used to have a boss that would say that this is, your last chance to make it right, and catch the mistakes. And then during inspection, we have punch lists, either above the ceiling punch list or final punch lists. I know that I've caught many things on various punch lists that I've been on. I had people with the wall washers. A contractor had faced the wall washer into the room and they thought that was okay. And I'm like, no, you have to turn it. So they of course had to do that. But those are the three phases of the lighting spec. Equipment selection considerations. So applicable building codes and or well building or lead initiatives. It's important to know which code you're referencing, what you have to do in order to meet the code. Well building perhaps would mean, circadian type fixtures, lead initiatives, etc. Equipment performance and efficiency. You can look up different energy efficient light fixtures, and if they're qualified on the DLC or not, that might be required or not. It just depends. Luminaire aesthetics, grade, and quality. And this is where sometimes as a designer, your expertise could come in. I know that I had a project where it was a site lighting and, I specified a really good fixture that I knew would work and would last. And a sub came in that I couldn't say no to. The client said, oh, no big deal, whatever, we'll use that. Okay. So a couple of years later, I'm driving around that parking lot and the fixtures that they allowed to be installed were doing exactly what I thought they were going to do. They were, falling apart and they looked horrid. So, that's an important thing to consider. Hopefully people listen to your opinion. Controls, that's usually specified by the ASHRAE codes or the IECC codes. And economic analysis and life cycle costs. It's definitely important to consider these things because the payback could be very, very quick for typical LED systems. Equipment selection considerations, budget and installation costs, product availability and lead time. Like I said, you're doing these construction projects and sometimes, you have to have the products right away. And if nobody has it, you're going to have to select a different product. Service by local representatives is important. For example, if you're going to have lighting control systems and you need commissioning done, it's, you don't have to wait for 2 weeks to get somebody out there to look at your system when you need it done now. And then regional manufacturers. I know that some of the lead requirements that I've had to satisfy in the past called for luminaire manufacturers that were within a certain distance, like a certain 500 miles or something like that. So it's, the regionalness is definitely important when you're thinking about that for those lead credits. Product warranty and manufacturers' financial and business strength to back the warranty. Some of these newer lighting manufacturers don't have, these type of guarantees built in. So the LED luminaire specification example. The LED luminaire shall have at least 4,000 initial delivered lumens, a luminous efficacy of at least 90 lumens per watt, a color temperature of 3,500 K, a CRI of at least 80, an estimated life of at least 50,000 hours at 70% lumen maintenance, and shall include a minimum 5-year full warranty on the entire luminaire, including the driver. The luminaire and LEDs shall have been tested and calculations performed in accordance with IES LM79, LM80, and TM21. So this is just a specification example that we're showing you. Now I'm going to turn it over to my friend Bob.
Okay, Catherine, thank you so much. So let's start looking into how lighting equipment is purchased. So we start at the manufacturer, and the manufacturer, of course, that's provided to the manufacturer's rep. The rep sells it to the distributor to the contractor, the general, and then that goes to the general contractor and then now down to the client owner. There could be some differences in this. This is kind of like the standard way, but we know that there's other options that are available. We're not going to go over those, but this is kind of like the typical food chain, so to speak, of how equipment is purchased. Okay, so we'll go to our next slide. And so here's some things to remember. anything that's not clearly outlined by the lighting specifier may be decided and provided by others. And we're going to talk about this throughout the rest of the presentation, being clear, being concise, and so forth, so important. So otherwise, other than the specifier, such as contractors or distributors, or maybe the owner, or maybe other team members could weigh in and could change the design intent of the specifier has. And so, but however, in the case of this one name spec, or maybe if you have a certain thing here that's only one name, it's important to allocate funds, additional allowance for the contractor with where there's no approved equals, because that way, like Catherine was talking about with her antler lights, she was able to get what she needed, and that was the right thing to do there. So regarding the document, so the idea is to create a formal specification document, which is a lighting schedule and pages of the equipment sheets that are, here we go, detailed and clear. So very, very important. So simply just providing a catalog sheet, it's not going to do it. It's just not going to be able to create the design intent. So these three are the key words: clear, concise, and specific. Very important, specifically as Catherine went over in the design phase, where you have the schematic design, the design development, and the construction and bid documents. Very, very important. Those three words: clear, concise, specific. So when we talk about this, the goal is to provide unit pricing for each fixture to help us manage the cost and in the budget. So, you know, what are the unit prices for the luminaires? And this requirement should be specific in the contractor general provision document. So what do we get with unit pricing? So if we have much higher than expected unit pricing, it can reveal maybe a misunderstanding, or that distributor has to purchase a product from another distributor. That's going to increase the cost. But what if it's lower? So then you have expected, maybe uncover some of the contractor may have forgotten something, or just didn't believe that it was accurate, or something's wrong, there's a mistake, or so forth. So if you have unit pricing, then this is what you kind of get that kind of falls out automatically, that benefits everyone. Unit pricing also helps to prevent the submission of inferior products. So if it's spec a standard product and a lower level was submitted, then again, having that unit pricing can help you. So it really protects everyone, you know, all the way up and down the line. Now, some of you may say, well, you know, it's not going to happen. You know, I just can't get a unit price. So here's a really good, I think, a good alternative to providing, and that's a group alternative to unit pricing, where submittals should be provided with pricing for each group. Let's take a look now at what those three groups are. So first of all, we have the fixture by the owner, or maybe by the architect. There's no substitutions. They want those antlers, they're going to get those antlers, and that's what they want. So, or a specific design, a period of fixtures, so forth. There's really no way that could be subbed. Then break out your lighting controls. So breaking out controls can keep that control section from driving and controlling the entire bid or the project. And then third, of course, is the white goods section. Generally, many people have these type fixtures, and they're available from multiple manufacturers. But if you break it out like this, then really it becomes very fair and very equitable, and many people are willing to do this. So things to remember continuing is a review of the submittals. What about your accessories? What about your ordering codes? So ordering codes, it's not sufficient to just use a family ordering code. You need down to the SKU, the ordering code down to the SKU, to make sure, specifier, that you get what it is that you want. It's really important to be able to maintain, again, that design intent. And so the other thing is communication to the extended team. You got a lot of people working on a project, such as interior designers, double E's, landscape architects, lead consultants, graphic designers, landscape architects, the list goes on. So communication up and down the line is really important. Now, here's something that's really a key. So small changes, and it could be product related or it could be timing. It really can cause a lot of work on the specifier to maintain accurate lighting specifications once some other change occurs. So here's a key to really controlling and managing this. So any updates or revisions to the lighting spec should be highlighted so they can easily be identified and reissued in accordance with the project milestone. Just highlighting those so that none of those changes will be missed is just so easy and just really important to do. And then second is identified for other potential documentation changes. So you know how complex this project is. So you've got your job drawings, you've got as-built, you've got other things that will go on that could be affected. So thinking about that, and also what about the calculations for lighting? So changing something there, you may have to do some recalculations to see if the performance, am I going to get 40-foot candles? Is the lumens distributed so that my uniformity is still good? All those kinds of things come into play. Now let's change our horses a little bit and go into another area, and a very, very important team player is the electrical contractor. So from the specifier point of view, if you establish an early positive relationship, you're going to win. So also facilitate exchange of information about what are you trying to accomplish here? What's the design intent? Give them an explanation of what's going to go on and what you're trying to achieve. Also prompt a safety review of light fixture locations. So the contractor may point out that, hey, I see your drawings, but we can't put a fixture over there because of this XYZ that might be there. So that's two-way communication. Provides help on where to purchase unusual or custom equipment. Contractor may not know. That may be something you could help the contractor out on so you can get what you want. And then identifies who to call if you have a question. So it's always good to have that really good communication. Now we're going to move into the threats. So this is one of the most important slides I think that we have for you today, as far as what are the threats to a lighting specification. So first of all, submitting a product that is not an approved equal. That's not good. Nobody wins. Just not it's definitely a threat. Not following the required lead time to get a product approved. We're going to talk more about that. So there's a certain way to do that. If you violate that, then it definitely is challenging the specification integrity from the specifier. A change in construction schedule, and we've already talked a little bit about that. That small change could throw everything out of skew. And then not complying with the intent of the 3-name spec. We just discussed that, so you know what that is. And then allowing VE options that are not approved. We're going to talk more about that shortly. But value engineering, so again, just because you VE it, the new VE doesn't mean it's going to be approved automatically by the specifier. So again, that needs to be approved as well, or any action really that would compromise the integrity of the design. So, just use your best judgment and your experience. And so if there's something that's going to compromise that, then, it's not good. Those are the threats that we came up with as far as what we'd like to cover for you today. Now, continuing on, that threats are most likely arise when? At the bidding phase of the electrical contractor selection phase. Why? By good old reason of money, because that's where the financial status of the project is clarified at this stage of the project. So money, you've heard the slogan that money talks. So this is why. So a specifier can take certain steps to decrease these threats. So what are they? first thing is be very visible, make strong efforts to play a positive role, be involved, and then be a consultant. It's not necessarily your way or the highway. It's like, let's consult on this. Let me hear your side and so forth. Let's work this out in the decision-making process. And then number 3, so relate to the owner or project manager the welfare impact of substitutions. Yeah, we can do this, but here's what's going to happen if you get this, and you clarify in advance which product should not be substituted and why. You're the specifier. You know the design intent. You know how to do this. So number 4, now we get on back over into the value engineering, is required on this project. So if it is required, then obtain a VE target number, and then we communicate that and any anticipated compromise to the client owner. So they're gonna, they say it's over budget. Okay, here's what's gonna happen. This is what I anticipate happening. And the idea of going back through the rep that won the project is probably the first place to start. I know others are going to be involved, but that person that won that project is going to know most about that project. Then, by doing this, this protects the client, the engineer, and the integrity of the design. And that's really, you know, like a win all the way around is what we want. So for example, avoid a low-grade fixture at a medium price. So engineer is liable for 15 years in many states. So you know, that seal is meaningful. You had to work hard to get that. And so that's why that's in there for many states, 15 years. Number 5, require written pre-qualified substitutions 10 days prior to bid date. Now you say, you know what, 10 days is too long. Well, the biggest thing is if it's not 10 days, what is it? And you decide whatever that is for you. It might be 7 days, 8 days. Typical is 10 days, and then we're going to talk about how we hold to that. But the other part I wanted to mention is place a note in the middle of the fixture schedule to ensure it can't be cut off from the rep. Now the rep is going to do a good job of trying to give you what you want, specifier. If they don't have all the information or part of that information is cut off, they can't do a good job for you. So by putting a note in the middle of the fixture schedule with certain things that you want is really, really a good idea. I would encourage that. All right, so the reality is the specifier is sometimes pressured by the contractor to accept less than written approval days by saying, can't get it, product not available. Catherine alluded to this already. This is kind of a common occurrence. This is what happens. And sometimes this does happen, but it shouldn't happen over and over, and it shouldn't be a regular thing, but it does occur. So what we need to do as a specifier is state specifically in the base specifications, you know, we talked about that failure to submit within the deadline guarantees that only the base specified products will be supplied and no other products where listed or where not be allowed. So you set up the rules and there's no exceptions. So this is basically the rules. Another thing another step to decrease the threats is should a reduction in project scope or goals be approved? Be in a position to advise. You're going to be that consultant on that lighting portion of that bid. So if the scope or a reduction in some of the goals maybe, then make sure that the client is getting the best they can for the money they're paying. So by doing all these things, you, Mr. or Mrs. Specifier or Miss, you establish yourself as a fair but firm specifier who plays by the rules that are known in advance to all parties. I don't know of anyone, in fact, that's what builds respect for you, the specifier. Always be fair, always listen, but always be firm because you're protecting the client's interest. And then number 9, do not bend the rules for your buddies, your friends, your longtime business associates. You know, that's the temptation. We all like to be nice to our friends. Maybe we treat our friends differently from those that we don't know quite as well. But what you're doing is this is a professional business arrangement, and you, the specifier, you're going to be establishing integrity for yourself as being, again, what did we say? Fair but firm. So that's the suggestions there. And then strategies to retain that design. So write the specification around fixtures and controls that are the most important. Most important fixtures, that's the main ones that you really want to focus on, as well as the controls. Then the specifications, here we go again. Clear, explicit, complete, accurate, no questions about it. You put down, what I say is what I mean is what I say. So that's really the guideline. We're going to mention this again, complete catalog number, not family catalog number, complete SKU number, all the way down to the SKU ordering code to get you what you want. That goes for controls as well as light fixtures. And then talk with each lighting rep and lay down the rules. Now that may sound a little bit hard and we don't really mean it that way, but a lighting rep is really looking for rules. They're really looking for guidelines of what you, the specifier, really want so they can do a good job for you. So if you know and do that up front and lay those down, then tell them to quote only what's specified, and you have prior approval. Basically, everybody's got to be happy, lowers the stress level on everybody. It works. Number 5, ask for distributor net pricing. So distributor net for fixtures and controls, and the markup for distributors is in that distributor net, but you may be asked for maybe a percentage for the electrical contractor, maybe the general contractor, maybe 15% is a good for each one of those, but you're going to know best on that. You may be asked to provide that. And then you want to also create your own notes on your internal pricing. So like, what do I think? What I think is fair. So summarizing some of the points, and we're going to say some things again in a different way, but re-emphasizing what we've talked about today is, number 1 is establish a reputation for standing your ground. Fair, you're going to be fair, but you're going to be firm. And if need be, you reject those that do not meet the intent of the design. Provide contract verbiage that specifies when submissions must be submitted. And there could be a penalty. For instance, you might have to say, well, this time you're late. I will look forward to the next time when you bid this. Here's my requirement. We don't make exceptions. This is the rules, and I look forward to the next time to working with you. So, and then include in the contract that substitutions must be pre-approved before bid. We've been talking about that really all of today. The other point that we mentioned is breaking out, those white goods, the controls, and then the owner or architect specified. So why do we want to do that? So it'll better achieve the overall welfare goals of you, the specifier, the bidding suppliers, and the client and owner. It just works to be able to do this. And then public bids are often come down to price. And we mentioned this earlier. So product subs can be a way to pocket more money by the contractor. Maybe not, but when things get tight and they go off a schedule, then there's an opportunity to cause the specifier to make a decision that they would not otherwise make. So what we need to do is to do the things that we've talked about today to mitigate those threats so that you won't be put in that pressure position at the last minute. You need to have a template system to reduce work. And I know everyone has a template system if you're a specifier. That can work for you, and it does work for you to save you time. But when you have a template system, make sure that it has some flexibility where you can update that template to make sure if one supplier or one line is no longer working well for you and another one is beginning to call on you and they are working well for you. So there's a way to be able to have some flexibility. It's not cast in concrete for 20 years. Then keep in close contact with the client owner. Always very important. Have that communication. Make sure they're understanding what's going on. Now, visual aids can really help in the rendering of the spaces so that you can describe to the owner what this might look like. It can be very valuable, non-technical way. Some people are very visual, so they love this as an example here of the rendering and then what it really looked like with a photograph here of a tower down in Dallas. So just an example of that. So, and then the last thing is, probably don't need to say this, but we will, because basically, if you tell the truth and you conduct yourself in an honorable fashion, then everybody's going to win. You're going to have low stress and everything is going to work out, bottom line. So with that, I'm going to have one reference, and this will go out with the slides that Christine will be sending out. This is this thing, the link that I talked about with the GS 133-3 in North Carolina. Now, the last sentence of this statute is what I wanted to read. So the purpose of this statute is to mandate and encourage free and open competition on public contracts. So by doing that, then you're saving the taxpayers of North Carolina money. Everyone is treated fairly and equally if we do what we talked about today. Another reason I wanted to include this link is that by doing this, if this were to change, and by the way, this statute's only changed a few times, maybe 3 times in the history, but if they update this in any way, by having this link, you're going to get the latest information for any changes. So I'm hoping that everyone here this viewing today will take this link, pull it up, this PDF, and read this and see what exactly the statute is covering what is expected for a public bid. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention today. I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Christine, for posting everything on the IES YouTube channel and recording everything today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
We hope that now the specifiers and all that work with specifiers are going to be better equipped, feel good going forward. And so thank you for having us. Have a great day.